Hey guys, welcome to the Editing Bard live stream today. Super excited. We're going to be going over writing tips that make sense. Apologize if the camera is a little grainy. I have moved into a new abode, a new lair, and still in the process of kind of getting things figured out. That light is totally reflecting in the glasses, which is not going to work. So fun times. Good morning. Glad to have you with us. Moved into a new space, hand created this beautiful masterpiece back here with pallets from the local Ace Hardware that they didn't need, and some extra stain that I had laying around. So super excited that I've kind of got a quieter space. The lighting is still in process of figuring out how to make that work. So I'm super excited about what we got today. I got a bunch of questions that came in, and super stoked to go over those. So to just kind of jump right in, the first question comes from Kimberly Hunt. She is a editor at revisiondivision.com. You can see her link down in the show notes. I know her. She's awesome. And she was asking what makes a character relatable. Great question. One that I get fairly often from coaching clients and the clients that I get for developmental edits. So it took me a long time to kind of process it and work this down into something that makes sense for myself. And then I had to reverse engineer it in a way that I could then describe it to people in a way that made sense. So I start off by, instead of going with your traditional like Dungeons and Dragons style, like name, race, age, weapon, magic use, that kind of stuff, I flipped it around on its head and I started reverse engineering it. So I started looking at what emotions do I want the character to go through over the course of the novel or series. In my case, I have book series-itis, and all I write is series. I don't think I could to write a self-contained book just by itself to save my life. So I'm looking at usually like a bigger time span. So with that, I was like, okay, what emotions do I want them to feel? Do I want them to feel anger, rage? Are they kind of one of those like level-headed characters? Are they the quick-witted, sarcastic type, which is typically where I fall into? So that's where most of my characters tend to end up. And I started there, right? And because what I found was just listing off D&D style, it was just kind of like, okay, I have a cool character, but are they relatable? Are they even remotely interesting? And when I was writing my Lord of the Rings fan fiction, this is kind of how the process started coming together. Is I had a character who I had created, what was it now, 13 years ago, and I brought him in to use, and I was super excited. But he was just kind of that D&D style. He's ranger, has a cloak, wears a sword, is a complete badass because reasons. And then in one moment, I accidentally killed off Mary in the fan fiction. So Mary just shows up dead. Sorry for the spoiler there, but it's pertinent to how to make characters relatable. And then all of a sudden I took this superpowered character that could like pull people into memories. And he just became this vengeful man, just living off of raw emotion, who was just like, come hell or high water, whoever did this, I'm going to kill him. And it was so strange because all of a sudden he was instantly more interesting than what he was. He was mysterious before, but now he was interesting because he was dealing with human emotions, human characteristics. So when you're creating a character, don't just start listing it off. You don't even have to have a name. Just be like, okay, I have a main character, boy or girl. How do I want them to feel? What emotions do I want them to wrestle with over the course of this book or series, depending on the type of book that you're writing? Then you move on to traits. So traits are different, and I created a whole worksheet for this. I probably should have thought ahead about it beforehand, because I don't remember where I put it. But yeah, probably should have thought about that beforehand, all things considered. But I go through and I talk about traits. And traits are, like honesty, integrity, loyalty, things like that, on the paragon side. Lying, deceitful, who would be on the villains. So I took these, and the way that I base it in my All About Characters worksheet is you have 3 columns, and you write hero, villain, and then in the middle, or you write out, the different traits that a hero would have and a villain would have. And then in the middle one, you write human across the top, and you take half and half from each side and pair them together. And you have more realistic traits for a character. Same with emotions. You take all the happy emotions, all the angry emotions, list them out. In the middle's human. After you've listed them out, you pair them together. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to create the emotional mindset of your character and the traits that they have before you've even written anything about them. You may not have their description. You may not know their backstory. You may not know what race they're going to be if you're doing like sci-fi fantasy. So that is how you start building a character that is relatable. The next step is to write the backstory using what you've just come up with for emotions and traits. And you write out the backstory. Like maybe as you're writing, you're like, oh, he's got a scar on the left side of his face, and that's because his dad beat him or broke it, or he was playing with friends and they were goofing off with knives and it cut him, and he's got a chip on his shoulder because of that. And those kinds of things. Suddenly the emotional and the emotional mindset and the traits that he or she has, now have set the precedence for your backstory. Whereas if you're just trying to come up with a backstory, it's just like, yeah, he was an orphan and some bad things happened to him, and you don't really know what they are, but you can discovery write that. But if you have deep emotional and relatable emotions, it makes it so much easier to actually build up a character that way. And then you can go into like, their race, their culture, their hair color, eye color, all that kind of stuff, because you've already laid the foundation for an interesting character. The characters are not going to be interesting simply because they're of a certain race in a certain geographical location, depending on the type of book that you're writing. So just something to keep in mind. Another thing that is relatable, that helps characters be relatable, are flaws. Like, you need to have a good flaw. Now, there's a difference between a weakness and a flaw. So, for example, my weakness would be donuts. Just be straight up. I have a weakness for donuts. You place a donut in front of me, and it will, unless it's got jelly filling in it, I can't do that. But if you put an stack of apple fritters in front of me, y'all better run, because I'm not going to share. It's not going to happen. The flaw that I have is that I'm very verbose. I will ramble and ramble and ramble at times, given the opportunity to. And I've learned to be able to talk and breathe at the same time. So I could just kind of keep going, like the little engine that could just keep going. And you're just like, yeah. Is he going to stop? I don't know. Oh, no. Okay. I guess I won't be part of this conversation. So that's a flaw that I have. I'm aware of it, but that's kind of the difference. And just kind of for humor's sake, an example. But you want to have, you can definitely have a weakness. Everybody has weaknesses. But a flaw is that thing that will typically keep the hero from doing what it is that they need to do and being successful at it. I'm trying to think of and villains should have flaws as well. Like, it's not just the hero. A villain should have a flaw. Typically, what I see in terms of flaws for villains, their go-to is usually pride. And the same for the hero. Those typically are the two is the main flaw that gets used. Doesn't mean you can't use it, just means that it's kind of overused. And you could probably find something that's a little bit different. I'm still trying to think of the character that I had in mind. Yeah, it's gone. If I remember it later, I'll come back to this. But yeah, when you're reading through books, you want to look for that flaws. That's what helps people relate to them. Is because, like, oh yeah, they do that, I do that. Makes them more relatable, makes them a little bit more human. So hopefully that makes sense, and that will help you start building characters that are more relatable, more interesting. You guys can actually get the worksheet that I was talking about, the All About Character worksheet, if you subscribe to my website, which there's a link down in the show notes at the Editing Bard. If you subscribe to that, you actually get 3 worksheets. So you'll get a brainstorming worksheet, a how to outline more efficiently, and the All About Character. And you can actually get that printed out and walk through that process of making interesting and relatable characters. So wanted to let you guys know about that. Next question comes from Robyn Buchanan. She is a writing coach over at teflnoah.com. I went over and checked it out. This dude's got the biggest man beard ever. My man beard was having identity issues and like a crisis a little bit just from looking at that beard. But if you're looking for like a writing coach or kind of a set of editors, you want to learn English, stuff like that, I posted the link down for I can't talk today. I had coffee. Their website is down in the show notes. So go check it out. But she asks, she has 2 questions. The first one is, what's the top thing a writer can do to tighten up their writing, in my opinion? Ooh. So one of the things that you can do to tighten up the writing is removing some of the filler words that we all tend to use in dialogue naturally. So is one. I use so a lot. That's my transition word. It's like, so. I can't begin to tell you how many hours of editing I have to do on my videos to kind of cut so out of the picture. It's a habit. It's my transitional word. You guys have probably noticed it, and you probably will notice it now, and and be like, wow, we could turn this into a drinking game. Every time he says so, we just taking shots. And that's another one. And is a tradition, it's like, and transitioning to something else. But the sticky spot with and is that it can be used too much. If you guys watched my video for That Writing Life, you'll have noticed that I use and I was watching it back and I was just like, oh, I use this way too much and I can't cut it because it's transitioning from thing to thing. I can't cut it, otherwise it would just be jerky. So when you're writing, keep that in mind, is that if you use and repeatedly, it's going to damage your sentence structure. Other filler words are just. That's another big one. Most of the time, it doesn't need to be there. If you go back and so here's a fun tip that you can use is if you have finished either a chapter or your whole novel, or you just want to do an experiment on it, then I believe it works. I know it works in the Word document. I don't know specifically about Google Docs. I haven't tried it, but in Word you can put up in the search bar at the very top, you just search just, and it's going to search the entire document, and it's going to show you all of the just that you have in there. And I guarantee you, the majority of the time, you're going to look at it and you're like, oh, that doesn't need to be there. Now, we use it in everyday dialogue, but it's background noise for us. On paper, it doesn't look pretty. Doesn't mean that you can't use it, but more than likely, it won't need to be there, and it can actually strengthen the sentence without it. Almost any word ending in ly, L-Y, filler words. Most of them don't need to be there. Really, actually, truly, verily, if you're kind of going Shakespeare. Those types of things don't necessarily need to be in there. Most of them can actually weaken the structure of your writing. So do a search for specific words, like search for actually. How many times does it actually show up? See, I did that on purpose. That actually didn't actually need to be there. It's an extra word. I could just say it didn't need to be there. It's more direct. It's more purposeful. So take those as examples, and that will be a good way to kind of shore up your writing a little bit. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to get rid of all of them. If you're wanting it to kind of sound a little bit more casual, like your conversation between characters, those are the kinds of places where it's easier to kind of get away with those, versus in the actual text of the book. It doesn't make quite as much sense, and it makes it a little bit weaker. So something to keep in mind as you're going. You can search those. Another cool trick is if you're not sure about a sentence or a word, you can actually use the hashtag. So you could put in, let's see. So if there's a particular area where you're struggling with the plot, or it's a sticky point and you're just like, I just don't know about this. It just doesn't make sense. Yes, it was Stephen King who said the road to hell is paved in adverbs. Now, again, I don't believe adverbs are the devil, so I don't think that they have their use. It's just like any rule of writing. It's more of a guideline than actual rules. To quote Captain Barbossa. That is one of my favorite things to tell authors that were like, but this person who's written hundreds of books have said this. It's like, that's great. And it works for them. That might not work for you. It's a general guideline. It's not a hard and set rule that like unless you're like the grammar police, then you might do it. But writing is meant to be fun. We're supposed to express ourselves in the way that we feel is natural. And it is natural to talk and use adverbs. We use adverbs in literally everyday speech. It is trimming down and being more purposeful with them so that way it has an impact when we want it to. That's one of the reasons why, like, if someone asks me, is like, there's swearing in my book, is that a problem? I don't have a problem with someone swearing, but if it's just gratuitous, then when they actually want it to mean something, it doesn't. Same with the adverbs. If there's a particular adverb that you're just like, this makes this sentence, but you've already used it like hundreds of times throughout the book, and you do it and you're like, ha ha. And the reader's just like, what's the difference? I don't get it. It doesn't land. It doesn't stick. It doesn't have impact. So it's just to keep that in mind, is that everything that are rules are guidelines, and you take little bits and right, exactly. So it's, in many cases, it's just about balance. It's about balancing it out, right? You want to have a variety of words, because there are stronger words. Like, there are absolutely stronger words. Like, he walked quickly. Quickly is not very descriptive. You could say he ran across the room rather than he walked quickly. He ran. He jogged. He sauntered. He had swagger. Like, there are stronger words that you can use to replace the majority of the adverbs that we typically use in our day-to-day lives. We just don't, because people would look at us funny, and we're like, oh yeah, did you see how quickly that guy was walking down the street? And if he's like, did you see how fast he sauntered? Everyone's just gonna be like, what? So it's balance, right? Balance. All right. Getting back to the other point that I had before the adverbs was, if there's a sticky point that you're just like, I'm not particularly sure how, particularly, it's another Lee. I'm not sure how I want to make this part work, but I'm just going to keep writing. But now, if you don't put anything there, how are you going to remember where it is? So what you do is you put hashtag at the start of the sentence, hashtag plot or hashtag sentence or hashtag something. Maybe. You put the hashtag and then whatever makes sense to you that will help you remember. So like fix flow, hashtag fix flow, hashtag plot issue, plot hole, those kinds of things. You put that there, and then when you've gone through and you're like, oh crap, where was that? You go up to the search bar, put in hashtag plot hole, sentence structure, whatever, and guess what? All of those will pop up. Now you don't have to endlessly just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling to try and find it. You, depending on the size of your book, like you don't want to do that. You don't want to spend just what you don't want to waste time, right? So these little things will help you shore up your writing and give you little shortcuts to get back to specific parts. So keep that in mind. The next question that Robyn had was, how do you get joy out of the revision process? Everyone loves revision, right? They love just spending hours and hours and hours going back through stuff that they've already written and fixing it and fine-tuning it, right? It just sounds like so much fun. A lot of people don't like it. I think it's probably the editing process is probably one of the most dreaded things for most authors. I think the first reason is because they're intimidated by it. There is this kind of culture of, I don't know, a lot of it's intimidating for a lot of people because they're having to go back through and rewrite it. And like, well, I got everything down the first time. What else am I going to add? You'd be surprised. But I think they get so overwhelmed with the thought process of having to go through multiple revisions. It's not just that they have to revise it once, is that they're probably going to have to revise it multiple times. And really the revision process can be made a little bit easier by hiring an editor. If you're going the self-publishing route, that is the majority of the people that I work with are indie authors who are planning on going the self-publishing route. So they want and need a developmental editor, copy editor, line editor, proofreader. Those that are traditionally going the traditional publishing route, doing a self-edit one time through and then starting the querying process isn't a bad way to go. You could hire a developmental editor if you wanted to kind of make sure it was like super spiced up and kind of ready. It's not necessary though. But to get ready for it, and I did this in a guest blog post. I'll put that down in the show notes when I actually publish this. I forgot to do it ahead of time. But when you go to edit, you've finished writing your book. Do not dive into the editing process. You are not ready. 100% you are not ready to dive into the editing process as soon as you've typed the end. You need to wait a minimum of 6 weeks. And you've locked it away. You've given it to a loved one, like that has buried it somewhere that you have no access to it at all. Because you should not be writing about it. You should not be thinking about it. You need to work on forgetting as much of it as you possibly can. That might sound crazy to you, but I swear to you, the reason is that your right side of the brain is your creative side. Your left side of the brain is your analytical side. This is the side that you need to tap into when you are doing the editing. You have to, because the creative side is all about just like, oh, shiny objects all over the place. I always imagine in my head, there's this green field just filled with plot bunnies. And the plot bunnies, while I'm writing, just start multiplying, right? Because we all know how bunnies do. There's just explosion of plot bunnies all over the place. That's the creative side. But if I've given myself distance from that, and I'm thinking and using the more analytical and critical side of my brain when I go through that, it makes it so much easier. Oh my goodness, is it easier? You're looking at it with fresh eyes. Two, while it's going to be familiar because you wrote it, you're also getting a fresh perspective, because you're rereading it as if it's for the first time. It might be familiar. It's just like when we read books, right? We read a book, we're like, oh my gosh, I love that. And we come back to it 2 years later and we're just like, I don't remember that. I like it. I didn't remember that part. That's cool. You're going to do that with your writing. I do that with my writing. I have like a stack of something like that of notebooks for 13 years of planning out my fantasy series. And I go back and I read through some of those and I'm like, I remember that. Damn, that was good. And then I'll give myself a little pat on the back, and then I'll keep reading, and then I'll be like, wow, what was I thinking? Like, this was awful. So fresh perspective, right? You're looking for fresh perspective. When you have fresh perspective, it allows you to then, when you go through, figure out those things that need to be fixed. Once you have gone through that and you transition to the writing and you're re-engaging that creative side, all of a sudden, all of these new possibilities start coming to life. And it makes the revision process a lot more fun. Having a writing partner to do it with, or be a part of a writing group where you guys aren't editing each other's work. This just would be my own suggestion here, is that you're not editing each other's work. You're really not even critiquing each other's work. You're just venting about your editing process. Because sometimes we just need to vent. We just need to tell somebody, be like, God, this is hard. Why did I do this? I need some encouragement. Can you guys tell me why I did this? And like, well, because it's a really good book. Okay, well, I guess I'll keep going if you guys think it's awesome. It's just, sometimes we just need a boost. We just need somebody to come alongside us and just be like, it's okay. We've been there. We've gone through the pain. Like you just eventually, your soul just becomes numb to it, and eventually you get through it. So it's humorous, right? You got to make light of it. You can't take everything so seriously. Like, make it fun, and don't burn yourself out. Just plan times. You have to, just like you create a writing process, you need to create an editing process. You need to have scheduled times where you sit down and the only thing that you do is edit, right? And this is after you're finished. Don't edit while you go. It slows you down. Create an editing process in addition to the writing process. So you have a process when you're writing that allows you to just boom, bust it out. Create an editing process. That looks like, okay, I'm going to sit down for an hour and I'm going to edit, just start going through it. It could be another day where like, man, I've done up to this point, but I really need something for the structure. I need to figure out the structure a little bit. Guys, I didn't have a plot for my novel until draft 2. I had to sit down before I started editing and be like, what's my plot? I wrote an entire book without a plot. I had a concept of like, she goes from point A, my main character, Trinia, goes from point A to point Z, and that was it. Like, she has to get to a boat. the the whole first draft was about getting her to a boat, and she didn't even make it to the boat. She got kidnapped. So the entire second draft, I had to sit down and be like, what's my plot? I didn't even know. So an editing process. Sometimes you're going to write and you'll be like, yep. This is kind of copy paste, almost verbatim of the first chapter. Oh, now it's changed. Okay, sit down, plot it out. Do milestones. I talk about that in the outlining worksheet. Don't just sit there and write out verbatim what's going to happen in every single scene. Set milestones. You have your beginning, your middle, your end, and you put little waypoints along the way that help you write through the book. That's part of the writing process. Same concept when you're editing. You're still using that outline. So figure out what you need to do, create an editing process, and it makes it easier on yourself because you're not like, God, I got to edit for like 18 hours a day in order to get this done. You don't have to edit for 18 hours a day to get through a book. A little bit done consistently over a long period of time adds up far quicker than you burning yourself out going through 18,000 words in a day and you're just like, I'm done. Like, I'm seeing 4 pages instead of the 2 that I'm seeing in Word or Google Docs. Like, my eyes are just like, whoop. So create a writing process, create an editing process, make it fun. Don't take it seriously, right? The first edit you're going to do is a developmental edit. It's that big picture. You don't need to worry about grammar at this point. You don't need to worry about sentence structure at this point. You're just focusing on the big picture. Does the plot even work? Does it make sense? Do the characters, do they do what I want them to do? Right? You start there with that big picture. And then if you don't want to do line editing or copy editing, hell's fire. I don't like doing copy editing and line editing. That's why I don't offer it. I stick with the big picture, the stuff that I'm good at. I can do the big picture. If you don't like that little minutia detail, find an editor. There's a couple of editors listed down in the show notes. Kimberly Hunt, there's Robyn, there's Trish Lockard. She does editing. I have an entire editing referral program with editors who would love to copyright or line edit, or not copyright, copy edit or line edit your book. So don't do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. Got to make it fun. Got to make it easy on yourself. Take a step back, deep breath, and just be like, you know what? We're going to do this and it's going to be fun. We're going to make it fun. Okay. Let's see. How many versions do you save as you're editing? So Sheldon's asking this, and a new save version for every session. Okay, so the way that I've done this is I use both Google Docs and Word. The benefit of doing both is it's saved in 2 places in a cloud, because I have Microsoft Office 365. So it goes into OneDrive, which is just up here above anything. You can't see my hands. I don't know where it's saved. It's just somewhere up in this area. So I have it's saved in 3 clouds actually, because I start in Grammarly. Okay. I start in Grammarly, I write in Grammarly, and then I transition all of those to Google Docs. I did that because I had a developmental editor look at my first draft. Okay. I am a developmental editor, but I needed somebody to do a developmental edit for me. So I had them go through it, and then I had all of their comments, right? This is the benefit of having a developmental editor, is that she listed out a ton of comments, super detailed comments, like mini novels in their own right. And it was fabulous because it helped me flesh out so much of my first book. I added an additional 1,500 words to my book, the first chapter of the second draft, simply because it forced me to sit back and reevaluate, like, and slow down. And then what I do, so first draft went into there, second draft has started, and there are still parts I'm copying and pasting into my second draft. And when I'm done with this, the full second draft, I'm putting it all into one document, okay? Because I need to know the word count. I need to know what my word count is. That's a personal preference of mine. You can save them individually. I prefer to have them in a single document. When I'm done with that second draft in its entirety, and I hand it back to an editor for copy and line editing, then what I will probably do is copy it, save it into a third draft file, paste it, edit. So I have first draft version, second draft version, third draft version in their entirety. Because then I can go back and I can look exactly where things were without being like, oh, shoot, was that there? Or was that somewhere else? That's my suggestion, because that's just how I work for as a process. First draft, second draft, third draft. Each edit is new because I don't want to lose what I've written by editing and messing with it. It's one of the reasons why I don't even edit someone's book. I make suggestions and leave comments and feedback. And if there's like a big issue, then I'll make a correction using track changes and I'll show them how to do it. Verity, I don't know how you do that, in addition to coming up with multiple languages, an entire world, maps, countries, political systems, and stuff that sounds like Shakespeare wrote it. Like, you have superpowers. I'm convinced of this. So hopefully that answers your question, Shell. I do a new version every single time for every new edit, because I don't I don't want to lose what I have. I want to keep it separate every single time. So that's my process. Next question. How important? So this comes from Trish, who I mentioned. She has a blog and editing services. Her link is down below if you want to check her out. She's got some fantastic writing tips on her blog. I spent some time reading there this morning. So how important is it that aspiring fiction writers be average readers, not average readers? Oh my gosh. That is not what I was implying. I apologize. Avid readers. So how important is it that inspiring fiction writers be avid readers? And which authors do you personally think every aspiring writer should read as examples of excellent writing? I love this question. So, first off, I believe that if you are wanting to write fantasy, sci-fi, thrillers, romance, you need to read in those genres. You need to have at least a base level understanding of the structures of how they flow, how they work, the tropes, the cliches, the things that are just like, this is what makes it. You need to know that, and part of how you do that is by actually reading those books. Now I'm going to be this is going to show my bias for books, but to answer that question, which authors do you personally think every reader should read? Depends on the genre, but first, if you're writing fantasy, J.R.R. Tolkien. Hands down, he's the father of fantasy as we know it today. He started this whole thing in large part. He created this massive world with a world history spanning tens of thousands of years, multiple languages that are each unique and different in the spelling, in the phrasing. Just don't even get me started on the differences between the Elvish languages. It's insane. And multiple, I think there's like 3 dwarven languages, several different languages for men in it. Verity says, I always say you will be influenced by Tolkien whether you read him or not. So you might as well read him anyway. Exactly. Anybody who is writing fantasy today has been and takes from Tolkien. Like they're inspired by it because people have been inspired by it, who've been inspired by it, who've been inspired by it. And then you read their book and guess what? They had been inspired by him. That's how it works. His storytelling, his world building will help you so much when you're learning to create these unique and diverse worlds. The second one, Dune by Frank Herbert, who was essentially the father of science fiction. His political sci-fi, I mean, there are plots within plots within plots within plots. So again, if you're reading science fiction, in large part, it was inspired by Herbert. Again, it's spanning tens of thousands of years, and there's political issues, there's assassination attempts, there's different houses vying for power. Some get power, some don't, some crumble. I mean, it is insane the breadth of the Dune sagas. So if you want to write science fiction, that should be on your to read list. Absolutely. And all of these books I'm linking down below, so you can A, check them out, and B, if you have the funds available to do so, I highly recommend that you buy them. Full disclosure, they are affiliate links, and no cost to, like, there's no extra cost. When you buy it, I make a small commission off of it. That helps support the channel. Full disclosure, I don't ever want to pretend like, I'm doing anything shady here. Very open about it. The affiliate links, I'm talking like really small, guys. Really, really small. Cents. I make sense off of this. But every little bit helps support this channel and me being able to bring you content. So that aside, next one that absolutely you should read. If you are writing romance, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. I love this book. I love the movies. But and if you'll notice, I'm pointing you towards classics, okay? Because people don't talk like this anymore. Exactly. People don't talk like this anymore. Be inspired by the beautiful language that unfortunately has almost all but died when it comes to literature. be inspired by these things because they are beautiful, and in their descriptions, in their phrasings. I mean, seriously, you can't get much better than these classics. And reading these, gives you an appreciation for them, of where writing has come from. Because don't just read what's popular now. That is beneficial. You do need to do some of that, especially, if you're trying to reach like YA. You know, getting into that is helpful. But the classics are where we come from. They are what inspired those authors today that you love so much to write in some capacity. Read the classics. So if you're going to write romance and you don't want it to be your modern, typical, just kind of like romance book, read Jane Austen. Read some of the other classic romances, Shakespeare, just take inspiration from them. Right, exactly. Classics are classics because they've stood the test of time. They are classics for a reason. There is a reason why we are reading them, in some cases, hundreds, if not thousands of years later, because they were that good. If you want your book to stand the test of time, learn from those classic authors. Not promising that your book is going to do that, but man, if you can internalize some of that stuff, I think you're setting yourself up for success. If you want like horror, I didn't fill out all of the genres. I'm just going off of some of the other ones. Another one's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's not like the movie at all. It's way better. It's far more interesting. Frankenstein isn't just like, ugh. He's not just like that. He's intelligent. He's like freaky intelligent, scary intelligent. So if you want a really good monster book, read the original. It's a classic for a reason. H.G. Wells, another one of like the founding fathers of science fiction. The books that he came up with are just absolutely incredible. Yeah. So read in the genre that you're writing. If you've been reading in a genre and you're like, you know what, I kind of want to test out another genre, read that genre. You don't have to write what you know, because you know what you learn. So if I only write fantasy, I know fantasy. I do know sci-fi, but if I want to know a specific genre or subgenre of sci-fi, then I would go and read that genre, so that way I can learn how to do it. Right? So take those, read, and not just read it, but absorb it, analyze it a little bit. You still need to read for enjoyment, but as you're going, you'll be like, oh, I see what they did there. That was really interesting. I like that. And if you start analyzing it just a little bit, as you're enjoying the process of writing and absorbing how they structure their words, how the words flow, you're going to be inspired. You cannot be inspired. Now, and don't worry about feeling like, well, I'm copying their style. If you're copying their words verbatim, that's called plagiarism. Plagiarism is bad. It is frowned upon in society as a whole. But you're going to absorb what it is that you read. I don't write like Tolkien writes. No one writes like Tolkien writes. Period. I won't even pretend to shoot for how Tolkien writes. But what I learned and what I figured out that I could do by absorbing how he did it is I can do world building. And I do it in my own unique way with my own unique style and flair. But it's because I read that and it inspired my imagination. So don't be afraid that you're going to like copy somebody. You're going to be inspired. It doesn't matter who you read, because someone was inspired by somebody else. Nothing new under the sun. Period. Nothing that you write is going to be quote unquote new. Everything has been written, but it's your unique take on that makes it special and makes it worth writing. Yeah, exactly. Verity says, you internalize every author you read to a degree, and then it comes out in your own style. Exactly. And that is how you grow. That is how you become a better author. I'm not just wearing this shirt just for fun. Like, this is my goal, but it's because I'm learning and growing and stretching myself and expanding how I write by reading classic literature, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Wells, Shelley, all of these different ones. You can learn how to write better, and you don't need to take a class. You just go read. Just freaking read the classics. Thanks. I don't even remember where I got it. I think it was either like my mom or my wife got it for birthday or Father's Day or something like that. I have a mug somewhere. I think it's upstairs in the cupboard, but it's got I'm a writer, what's your superpower? And so yeah, there's that. All right, so moving on, breeze through this last question here. And this kind of pertains to what I just was talking about. Is I'm writing a story. There's no name with this one. They wanted to stay anonymous. I'm writing a story that is a lot like other books out there. Why would anyone want to read mine? Now, this is kind of like a lightning round because I only got 3 minutes left. But the reason is because you have a story to tell. No one else can tell your specific story. Period. That's the end. Like, no one can tell your story. There are people who will write books and they're dealing with the same things that you're dealing with right now. Okay, so if you're out there watching this, please understand there's always going to be someone more qualified, more educated, and better at writing than you are. It doesn't matter. It literally does not matter one iota, because you have a story to tell. It's unique to you. It's unique to your perspective, your life experiences, all of the things that make you uniquely you. It's being brought and being shown in your writing for whatever it is. I have 11 students under me, and I have several of them who are writing very similar books. And in nonfiction, I mean, think about it. Like, there's a book for everything. Nothing new under the sun. But your story matters. The thing that I try and tell people, and this is why I love my job as a coach, as a developmental editor, as an author, as a YouTuber, is if the only thing you get out of this live stream is this point, totally worth it. Your story is going to change someone else's life. You are going to be someone's inspiration. That may sound like a lot of pressure. It may sound terrifying? And the answer is yes to both of those. There is a pressure on there, and it is terrifying. But just imagine that. The authors that you've read who have been inspired by someone inspired you, and you will be someone who inspires someone else to write their story. Let that sink in for a minute. And imagine the power of you telling the story that you want to tell, because there's a message in it, right? There's a purpose to the story. You write the story for you, and you think about, who's that one person that I want this story to reach? One person. I don't care when I finish up with my book, if one person buys my book and they see God in it, that's enough for me. I don't need to make millions. I don't expect to make millions. I have zero expectations for my book at all. But if one person reads it and is inspired to continue writing, and is inspired to tell someone else that they can do it, then I have done my job as an author and as a coach and as an editor. Plain and simple. So thank you guys for joining me on today's live stream. If you haven't already, make sure you go down, you click subscribe, hit the little bell so that way you get notified of when I do these. I'm doing live streams every other week. Schedule provided. I got new content on the way. I got a new series actually filmed. It's just a matter of editing, about creating a writing process, which I am so excited about. I have the vlog, That Writing Life, where I'm showing the more personal side. So it's not a 1 hour live stream where I'm just a complete ranting dork by the end of it. But it's how writing has affected my life and the benefits of writing. Yeah, I appreciate that you guys join me, and that, you know, I get to talk with you guys. It's why I do what I do, is to help inspire you guys to tell your stories, because they matter. And it's going to affect someone else's life in ways that you will probably never see, you will probably never experience, but it's going to make someone's life better. So, ending on that, I look forward to talking with you guys again next week. And if you have questions, feel free to contact me anytime. Connect with me on social media, or sign up for the newsletter and get updates. All right, guys, take care. Now it's a matter of figuring out whether I can turn this off or not, because I don't know what's happening. There it is. All right. Bye, guys.